Hello, Adobe fans. Welcome. My name is Chris Georginas. I'm an Adobe community professional and longtime Adobe user. And in this session, I'm going to show you how to create awesome animations for social media using Adobe Animate. So this is going to be an action-packed half hour of vector goodness. It's going to go quickly because there's a lot to cover as far as design and animation goes using Adobe Animate in a very short amount of time. So don't worry if you miss something. You can always rewatch this video later on demand. If anything, by the end of this session, you'll have a really good understanding as to what you can create using Adobe Animate. And I'm excited to show you. So, ready to get started? Here we are inside of Animate. We're going to create new. So let's click this button up here in the upper left. This is going to open up the new document panel. And you can see we have lots of categories, lots of presets. You can pick from several of these, but I'm going to show you how I work and how I do this. So I'm going to go back to character animation category. You'll see, again, there's a few different presets, but Twitter likes 1280 by 720. And if that's for landscape, if you want to go vertical, 720 by 1280, and square, 720 by 720. This is what Twitter recommends. As far as YouTube, I always use 1920 by 1080, 16:9 ratio. That way, when people are watching your videos, they have the option to watch them in high quality. So in here, back in Animate, new document, I'm actually just going to type in for width. I'm going to type in 1280, and for the height, 720. And as far as frame rate goes, I personally prefer 24. That's an industry standard for animation. And now click just create, and we're inside our document. Now I'm going to sketch my character. I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to grab the brush tool and like a dark gray color, and really quickly, I'm just going to actually speed this up a bit here and just create a really simple character just to use as a guide. You can actually draw if you want, say in Photoshop or outside of Animate, and then import it in however you like. Sometimes I take a picture of something and just airdrop it to my computer and import it as a bitmap. But once my sketch is done, what I like to do is the layer that it's on, I right click over the layer and I go to properties, and I'm just going to reduce the opacity a little bit here just to kind of push it back a little bit. There's a few different ways of doing this, but this is one way I like. And now I'm going to click the plus button here in the timeline and create a new layer. Now I'm going to start drawing with vectors, and using these primitive tools, I'm going to grab the oval tool and making sure object drawing mode is on. I love object drawing mode. And I am going to now, let's go and open up my color panel because I want to mix a skin tone for her. I'm going to pick something kind of orangey maybe, or pinkish in tone. So let's start with something close. And then what I like to do is use the color mixer sliders here on the right, or just find something in the window here, just start clicking around. And obviously the swatch is updating in real time. I'm going to add the swatch. Good. I have it as my fill. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to take my swatches and dock them with the color panel. And so they're together in case I need them both. I do not want a stroke color, so I'm going to select no stroke or no color for the stroke option. Now, again, making sure, yep, I got my oval tool, object drawing mode. I'm going to hold down the shift key, click and drag to constrain the proportions of this circle. And this is her face. So I'm going to place it roughly where her face is right now. Now I want to create her mouth. So I'm actually going to copy and paste this same object, the circle. Again, I'm going to select a stroke color this time. I'm going to mix it a little bit darker, and then I'm going to go over to the tools panel. Once I find the color that I want to use, I can always update it later if it's not perfect, but I'm going to go over to the tools panel, grab the ink bottle tool, and just click right in the middle of that shape. It's going to add a stroke to it. I'm going to select the object, go to the properties panel, and I am going to adjust the thickness or the weight of the stroke itself until I'm happy. Now what I want to do is get rid of the fill color. So while it's selected, going to go click on the fill swatch and select the no color icon. Now with the selection tool, I'm going to click and drag the top half that selects the top half of this vector stroke and hit delete. Now I just have the bottom half of this stroke. So now it's an object drawing. I can place it over the head without editing it or interfering with it. Scale it down using the free transform tool, which is also located on the tool panel, or just hit Q. I'm going to copy and paste this same stroke. That is the mouth. Adjust it, scale it down, adjust the stroke width. And this is going to be her eye. So I'm really just reusing a lot of shapes that I created for different aspects of this character. Just copying and pasting. And sometimes I'm holding down Alt key and I am duplicating objects by clicking and dragging them. Now let's create the neck. Again, I told you I was going to go fast, and this is going to be super fast because we have a lot to get to in a very short amount of time. Using the rectangle tool, I'm going to just draw out a rectangle shape using the rectangle tool. And while I'm at it, I want to create a shadow as well. So I'm going to double click the object here with the selection tool. I'm going to enter inside here. First, actually, I'm going to just scale it a little bit taller. So now I'm going to click and drag, selecting the top half, and I want to just mix it because I want to create a shadow effect, because this neck is going to be behind the head and I want to give it a little bit of depth. And I kind of don't like that color. So I'm going to go back in, select that color, and I don't know, maybe I'll mix something else and play around with these, with the hue, saturation, and brightness sliders. And now what I want to do is push it behind the head. So what I'm going to do, because everything's on one layer as objects, go to Modify, Arrange, and then Send to Back. And there we go. So next, what I want to do is move on to the hair. I'm going to grab a bright orange color, go back to the Tools panel, grab the Oval tool, create a big circle over her face, and I'm going to double click inside of this object, click and drag outside of it, select the bottom half, and delete it. Now what I want to do is just edit this so it becomes the front part of her hair, or her bangs, so to speak. And what I'm going to do is use the selection tool and start bending these edges and sort of form this hair around her head a little bit. What I did there is just clicked and dragged and selected the left half of the hair. And what that allowed me to do is create an opposite curve, like an S curve. So now I'm playing around with this hair. You can make the hair any shape you want. You can even leave it like this. It could be a boy, it could be a girl. It doesn't really matter. What I want to do now is actually show one ear. So I'm going to click on the face and I'm going to copy and paste it. Free transform tool, scale it down, and I've got an ear. That's simple. So now the next thing I want to do is grab the rectangle primitive tool and then go over to Properties panel. And in the rectangle options, I'm going to type in 100 because I want all four corners to have a really nice curve to it. I'm going to create this pill-like shape. This is going to be her torso. So what I'm going to do now is double click inside it. And like I did for the neck, I'm going to click and drag and select the bottom 2/3 and change the color. So it will become her shirt color. And I'm also going to do that again. I'm going to mix a much darker color, and I'm going to click and drag and select the bottom third, fill it with that new darker color, and that's going to become her pants. Now, while we're here, I'm going to grab the rectangle tool, still have object drawing mode on, and create some shoulder straps for her. And I'm just making a few adjustments with the selection tool, grabbing some of these corners and kind of angling the top part so it looks like it's wrapping around or over her shoulder. If I hold down the Alt key or the Option key, depending on what computer you're on, whether it's Mac or Windows, and click and drag an object, it duplicates it. Now, other times I copy and paste. So now for the legs, I'm going to grab the Line tool and have the stroke color be the same color as the dark blue that is the pants. And I'm just going to draw a vertical line, and this is going to be the top thigh of her leg, the top part of her leg. For now, I'm going to just duplicate this and create her arm. While it's selected, I'm going to choose the flesh tone, free transform tool. I'm just going to rotate it, position it, and go back to Modify, Arrange, and send it to the back. And with the selection tool, I can grab the end and make it longer, and also grab the click and drag the stroke and give it a nice little bend. For now, I'm going to, again, duplicate this as well and transform it vertically and then horizontally and arrange it to the back and to create her other arm. Okay, so now what I want to do is give her really long hair. Using the Line tool, I'm going to create a stroke vertically, and while it's selected, I'm going to go to Properties and adjust the stroke size slider all the way to the right, make it really thick, arrange it to the back, and then with the selection tool, just click and drag it. And it's a little too long, so I'm going to double click it and just click and drag that bottom part. And again, it's just a stroke, so I can adjust the length of it very easily. And while we're at it, we don't need the sketch anymore, so I'm going to just delete that layer entirely. The leg here, I'm just going to, for now, for the sake of finishing her, I'm just going to temporarily copy and duplicate this shape, this stroke for now, so I get the overall gist of it all. So you can see I could select everything. I got my characters pretty much complete. Now, before we start to animate, I want to make sure I convert all of the parts of our character to a symbol, specifically a graphic symbol. And so what I'm going to do is start with the hair, and I'm going to just click on it to select it. And then I'm going to go up to the Modify menu and click on Convert to Symbol. And in the Convert to Symbol dialog box, I'm going to name it appropriately, hair_backworks, and then click OK. And now, since it jumps up to the front because I converted it to a symbol, I'm going to arrange it to the back again. Now I want to just make sure I select her entire face, eyes, mouth, ear, and the front of her hair. And I want to convert that to a symbol, all those objects. I'm going to call it head and click OK. And while I'm here, I want to grab that neck, convert that to a symbol, name it neck. Again, arrange it behind. I want to grab the entire torso, the shirt, the shoulder straps, everything, convert that to a symbol, name it torso. The arm, I'm just going to convert to a symbol once, and I'm going to show you why later. Also, just one of the leg segments, I'm going to convert that to a symbol. And again, I'll show you in a minute why. I'm going to double click it and enter into the symbol for the leg. As you see here, scene 1, inside a leg, the leg stroke is selected. I'm going to go to Modify Shape and convert the line to a fill. That's going to make it easier when I use the free transform tool later to grab it and rotate it. I'm going to delete the other 3 segments. I want this segment. I want to duplicate this symbol, the leg or both legs, all 4 parts of the 2 legs, all to be comprised of the instance of this one symbol. There's no need to create multiple symbols. They're all going to be the exact same shape. Okay, now what I want to do is duplicate this symbol for her other arm. It's going to make sense very soon when I start to animate her arms as to why I'm doing this. I'm actually going to cut down the time it's going to take and the amount of labor to animate in half by doing this, by nesting animations. Again, I'm going to get to that very soon. It's all going to become crystal clear. Now, I'm going to select every symbol of this character and I'm going to modify and convert the entire character to a symbol. I'm going to call it girl underscore rig and then click OK. Now what we want to do, now that she's an entire symbol, she's inside of an object, I'm going to double click and do all the animation inside here. So let's double click the symbol of the girl rig. And while everything is selected, I'm going to right click over it. And this contextual menu that pops up, I'm going to find Distribute to Layers. It's down about halfway down and click on that. Now you'll see that every symbol is distributed to their own layer. And the layer names have adopted the symbol names, which is great. Now, the next step, though, before we even start to animate, it's very important. We're going to grab the free transform tool. We're going to click on a symbol, and you'll notice when I do that, the center point's in the middle. And when I rotate, that's how it's going to rotate based on the center point. We don't want that. We want to have our character hinge anatomically correct. So let's click and drag that center point and place it down here where the head would naturally rotate from. Let's do the same for the neck. And test it. Perfect. And let's go down to the torso. Yeah, let's move that down there. That works for me. Let's select the leg. And actually, let's make sure that these legs are going to hinge correctly. So convert the layers to outlines. I'm going to nudge with the arrow tool down a little bit so that this looks like it's going to work much better. When I rotate the leg, I'm just testing to see if there are any gaps or weird overlaps that occur at the kneecap area. So again, free transform tool, select this. It's really important to do this before creating any additional keyframes and applying any kind of classic tweens. That white dot, that center point, needs to be in the same exact location on these symbol instances across all keyframes, or else you're going to get some weird, unexpected drifting. So here, the arms, yeah, perfect. They're going to hinge naturally at the shoulder. So this is important. Now we can go ahead and start creating additional keyframes. Here in the layer, let's go to Show Parenting View. Before we animate, we're going to parent some of these layers to each other. So we're going to develop basically a parent-child relationship between some of these parts. The torso is going to be the main parent. So what I'm going to do is take the neck. In here, I'm going to click and drag to the torso layer, and that's going to link it in a parental-child relationship, right? Do the same for the head. Drag that to the neck, arm to the torso, both arms to the torso. The legs, I'm not going to parent to the torso. I'm just going to parent them, the upper leg to the lower leg for both legs. All right. And there's a reason for that, because I don't want to, later when I rotate the torso, I don't want the legs to rotate out of position. For this dance sequence, it's going to be a lot easier just to parent the legs separately from the torso itself. Okay. And the next thing I want to do is make sure the hair is parented to the head. So that's going to, when I rotate the head, the back of the hair will also move with it. I'm just doing some test poses here just to make sure everything's going to work right for me. This is going to make animation a lot quicker and easier. Now we can actually start creating keyframes and poses. So I'm going to make my animation 40 frames long. I'm going to click and drag down across all layers at frame 40. I'm going to go to Insert, Timeline, and Insert Frames. So this is going to extend, let's say, the exposure of my timeline. This is going to give me some time to work with here. And now what I want to do is create keyframes. I can go to Timeline and hit Keyframe. What I've done is gone to frame 6 and selected all these frames across all these layers. But there's also a quicker way to do this than using the menu. I can go to the little drop-down menu in the top right of the Timeline panel and open up the Customize Timeline option. And this allows me to actually select different tools, shortcuts for things like creating tweens and keyframes right here in the timeline panel itself. So I'm going to turn this on. This is a huge time saver. This is what I'm going to use here because it's easier to see what I'm doing. So I went and created keyframes across all layers at frame 6, and now I'm posing her. I'm going to change her pose and make her dance. So again, free transform tool. The layer parenting is working great. And this is going to be her first dance move. Right, so frame 1, she was standing upright, and now she's going to move to this position. I'm not worried about tweens yet. I just want to get some poses down. So at frame 10, click and drag across all the layers, and then insert keyframes using the shortcut at the top of the timeline, and free transform tool, and start posing. I'm just going to move these legs like this. And I'm going to scrub the timeline back and forth just to get a feel for what is happening. So I'm going to keep going. Say frame 10, I'm going to create more keyframes. Let's make her move in the opposite direction. Extend her leg up. Let's bring that one down a little bit. Yep. And perfect. Let's scrub. That's looking pretty good to me. Let's create more keyframes, more poses. And this is pretty much the first half of the animation, as we can see here. So in an essence of time, I'm going to click and drag to select a range of these keyframes I created. Hold down Alt, click and drag. It's going to duplicate all these keyframes and drag them to the far right of the timeline. And I'll make a few timing adjustments and scrub the timeline. But basically, this is the way I like to work, and I'm going to click and drag again, and with all these frames and layers highlighted, I'm going to click and apply a classic tween. And see, it applies it to all of these layers across all of these keyframes. And now we can scrub the timeline and see her come to life. Classic tweens interpolate motion over time in even increments. So what I want to do is provide a little bit more realism and by adding easing. So let's click on any frame that has a classic tween, and then you'll notice over in the Properties panel, next to Effect, in the tweening section, you can click on Classic Ease, and you'll see lots of different ease styles, like ease in and ease out and ease in and out, and then the curve types like quad, cubic, quart, and quint. Those are usually the top 4 I tend to gravitate to. If you've downloaded this file, please feel free to explore by clicking any of these frames that has a classic tween, looking in the Properties panel, seeing what type of ease curve I applied, and how that affects the character's movements. You'll start to get a good idea and a good feel for what types of eases you'll want to apply depending on the motion that is going on. So here I'm just going to scrub the timeline back and just see how these eases have affected the animation. And I'm going to add some easing out, and in some cases easing in, depending on the motion. It's okay to experiment and try different eases and play it back and see how it affects your animation. But to me, that looks pretty good. So now what I want to do, I'm going to double click the arm symbol, okay? Now here, this is just a stroke, and this is going to use shape tweens. But what I want to do is make sure this timeline, now we're inside the arm, remember, is the same duration as the rest of the symbols on the parent timelines. And what I'm going to do is just create more keyframes, use the selection tool, and just start bending this stroke and make her arm start to wave and flap around. So I'm going to create another keyframe on frame 5. I might later on decide to move a keyframe or two over a frame or two, but for now, just get the motion down, start experimenting. I want to actually click and drag, select the left half of this stroke, and that way I'm actually able to bend and create an S curve. If I bend the right half of that stroke, that was unselected. So there's lots of cool ways of manipulating vectors inside of Animate. And I'm just going to continue for the sake of time, creating more keyframes and using the selection tool to keep on making our motions. And I'm always playing back my animations just to get a feel. Here, let's create the actual shape tween and start to play this back just to see if it's going to work. That looks pretty good. Doesn't mean you're married to this if and when you've applied the tween. You could still go back and make edits. You can again apply or insert keyframes inside of tweens that already exist if you want to make more changes or move keyframes around. And let's apply a shape tween to this part and scrub this timeline. Yeah, and that's looking pretty good to me. I like that. Let me just duplicate these keyframes and we can get the latter half of this animation going. And so now here's what's really important. Back out on this main timeline, we animated the arm moving up and down, right? So all these keyframes, you can see her arm kind of stutters. That's because when we click on the arm and look in looping, it's told to loop starting on frame 1, right? Now, on frame 6, that keyframe that holds this arm, if we go to frame 6, click on the arm, oh, it's told to go back to frame 1 again. This is frame 1 of the nested animation inside the arm symbol. There's a way to fix this. I need to add a little bit of classic tween to that very last keyframe. Now, let's make sure we click and select all those keyframes, and in properties, in the tweening section, make sure that the sync symbols box is checked. What that does is it syncs the nested animations, that animation of the arm, all those frames and keyframes inside that symbol, it syncs it with the parent layer, which is this layer here. All right, so we can do the same now for the other arm because that's an instance of the same arm we just animated. So now this is what I meant earlier by cutting the amount of work in half. Right? Because we used a duplicate of the arm symbol, we're reusing animations at this point. So both arms are really the same symbol, just reversed. Now her hair, we could leave it as is, right? Especially the back of her hair specifically. But I want to show you a really cool tool called the Asset Warp Tool. So Asset Warp Tool works great with shape. So go to Modify, Shape, convert this line to a fill. Right? And grab this Asset Warp Tool. It's a pin, and just click on this shape and you'll see this mesh appear. I'm going to click at the top, the middle, and here at the bottom. And if you look over in Properties panel under the warp options, I'm actually going to turn off the mesh just for clarity. Again, inside the hair, I'm going to make it the same number of frames long as the rest of the animations, 40 frames long. And now what I can do here is use the Asset Warp Tool to actually start making the hair flop around and animate. So just click and drag and you can bend the hair. So what I'll do is I'm actually only going to manipulate these bottom 2 pins. I'm going to create additional keyframes and continue animating the hair going in different directions. And I'm going to create a classic tween and see what that looks like. Pretty good. Now let's create another keyframe. Make the hair move up higher on the left side, create a classic tween, and just keep on testing the animation, making adjustments, fine-tuning. It's good to make broader motions and then go back and add more secondary movements. But this is coming along nicely. I like what this is, what the hair is doing relative to her dancing. Now, I've animated this a few times before, so I kind of know how the hair would react and the timing of it all. Again, if I were to do this from scratch, it would take about an hour, hour and a half. So don't think that, I mean, I'm showing you everything that you can do in Animate as far as designing and animating a character in a half an hour. It doesn't mean that in the real world, this is, you know, how much time it takes. It usually takes a lot more. You know, oftentimes even after I get this far, I'll spend another hour or two fine tuning and adding little secondary animations here and there just to make the animation a little bit more interesting. But for the sake of time, we're just going to keep it really simple. So again, a little bit of easing here. I'm just going to click on some of these classic tween spans in between some of these keyframes. and make a few more adjustments. I definitely want to make sure that the hair on the first keyframe and the last keyframe are the same, so it loops seamlessly, which it now does. Let's add some easing out there. And let's go back to the girl rig. Let's play this timeline, and I'm happy with that. That's really cool. So now what I want to do is add a shadow to her. I'm just going to create a new layer and name it shadow, and then go up to the tools panel and grab the oval tool, and let's go over and mix a dark color like black with some alpha. I'm going to turn off that stroke first too. I don't want a stroke. But around 20 or 25% alpha will work. Then click and drag out a little shadow shape here, a little squashed oval, so to speak. And now I'm back on the main timeline. And now we want to just extend the this timeline out enough frames to accommodate the length of all the nested animations, which as we know is 40. So I'm just going to select 40, hit F5 or insert frame, and now I can watch my animations play back. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just name this layer and call it girl. I'm going to create a background layer. So let's hit the plus sign again, create a new layer, drag it below the girl layer, name it background, and then choose the rectangle tool again. And let's select a fun color like teal, and then click and drag to make a shape that covers the entire stage. So now earlier at the beginning of this session, I talked about the power and the advantage of nesting animations. Here it is. As we know, all of the animations for the girl dancing are nested. That allows me to scale the symbol containing the girl dancing, but also if I hold down Alt or Option, depending on what computer you're on, but also allows me to create multiple instances of this symbol of the girl dancing. So now I can compose an entire scene of dancers very quickly and very easily. I can click on the middle instance and let's arrange her to the front and move her down, grab the free transform tool. Let's scale her up a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of depth to this scene. And the ones on the end, let's scale them down a little bit. Again, just adding a little bit more depth. So for now, let's share it. So up here in the upper right of Animate, right, the quick share and publish button, click that and then click on social share. We're going to share this to Twitter, although you could share it to YouTube, but for this session, we're going to share it to Twitter. So if I click on that, if you haven't already, we have to authorize the application. So I'm going to type in my username, which is Keyframer on Twitter, and then my password. And I want Animate to remember me, so I'm going to select that and authorize the app. Now what I can do is in the description box, I can go in and type whatever I want, tag Adobe Max, tag whoever I want, and then just simply click the share button. And now Animate is publishing it and uploading it. And in just a few seconds, boom, you can view it in the browser. And here is my Twitter. And if we scroll, there is the animation we just created. So I know I threw a lot at you. I'm here for questions. Follow me on Behance. Follow me on Twitter at keyframer.com, which is my website. I'm always happy to answer any and all questions that you may have, provide you with source files of any kind. Enjoy Adobe Max, and until next time.